Senator Ayad.
I want to thank the chairman. I want to thank all the witnesses for being here. I also want to take this opportunity. It's probably going to be the last time that General Dempsey testifies before the committee. I want to thank you for your dedicated service and for the service of your family. And I know, General, that when you appeared before the committee on July 7th, I was actually the person who asked you about, there had been floated some views in the press at that time that Iran was pushing for lifting of the resolution on ballistic missiles and the resolution of arms, which we now know are in the agreement at 5 years and 8 years. Just to be clear, when you came before the committee then, you said under no circumstances should we relieve pressure on Iran on those issues. So was it your military recommendation that we not agree to lifting of those sanctions?
Yes, and I used the phrase as long as possible, and then that was the point at which the negotiation continued. But yes, that was my military advice. Thank you.
I also wanted to ask you about an issue I know Senator Ernest had talked about, and the Iranian cyber activity. And a number of years ago, we saw that there was an interruption of Iran's nuclear program through some other cyber activity, I think was reported, called Stuxnet. And that was reported in the press, I believe. In this agreement, according to paragraph 10.2 of Annex 3 of the deal, the United States is actually obligated under this agreement to help strengthen Iran's ability to protect against sabotage of its nuclear program. It might be hard for Americans to believe that we would agree to help Iran protect against sabotage of its nuclear program in light of its prior intentions. And General Dempsey, I wanted to ask your opinion on that. Do you think it's a good idea for the United States to help Iran actually protect its nuclear program against sabotage?
I hadn't thought about that, Senator, and I would like to have the opportunity to do so. I will say there is, back to the cyber question that was asked earlier, I think next week this committee and the Senate will consider some cyber legislation that we've been eager to see passed for some time so we can get ourselves better protected.
Well, when we know that Iran continues malign activity on the cyber front, the idea that we would agree to help them protect its nuclear program against sabotage, and I assume, as I read this language, that that would also obligate us to inform the Israelis, inform Iran if the Israelis were undertaking any kind of activities that might undermine its nuclear program, at least if we're going to adhere to the plain language of this agreement. So I wanted to also ask about this idea. We've heard a lot about sanctions. And sanctions, as I understand, Iran has written the United Nations on July 20th about this sanctions regime. And one of the issues that has concerned me about this agreement is that once the sanctions, the long list of mainly congressionally mandated sanctions that will be lifted under this agreement are undertaken, if Iran, for example, engages in terrorist activity, which it is known to do, separate from the nuclear program, Iran seems to have taken the position in its letter to the UN, and I've actually read the agreement, and I've been concerned that the agreement provides the same, that in fact Iran says it is understood that reintroduction or reimposition, including through extension of the sanctions and restrictive measures, will constitute significant non-performance which would relieve Iran from its commitments in part or in whole. So my question is, as I read this, I'm deeply concerned that if we want to reimpose the toughest sanctions on issues related to their terrorist activities and support for terrorism, which is another tool in the toolbox, General, aside from our military options, that Iran can then walk away from this agreement. And if the answer is you disagree with this characterization, please tell me where in the plain language of this agreement am I wrong?
Senator, the language says we can't reimpose the nuclear sanctions if Iran complies with the nuclear agreement. We have never given away any of our ability to use other sanctions regimes, terrorism or human rights.
But Secretary Lew, with all due respect, the nuclear sanctions are the toughest sanctions that we would impose in other contexts too, including on crude oil, oil and gas, on
Senator, we
revenues.
reserve the right, if there's a financial institution that's engaging in financing terrorism, to put sanctions back on that institution. That is not a violation of the agreement. It is not a nuclear sanction.
But Iran seems to take a different position.
Well, what Iran does believe is that we can't take the nuclear sanctions, put a different label on them, and put them right into place. And what we would have to do is make the case, as we have on many occasions, that institutions should be sanctioned for their behavior on terrorism and human rights and regional destabilization. We will continue to do that. We will do it vigilantly, and all of our sanctions that apply in that area still stand.
There's no restraint.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and General Dempsey, thank you also. Every time we say goodbye to you, you come back in another week on another panel, and I know it's not by choice, but we're thrilled to have you here again. Thank you very much for your service. Mr. Secretary, Secretary of Energy, if a year from now we have suspicions that something is going on at Parchin, does the IAEA have access to go inside that building and see it or not?
Well, again, we certainly have, through the additional protocol and this agreement, access anywhere that there is suspicion of nuclear activity. The protocols, again, I would have to see with the IAEA, but it is certainly a different, forward-looking, is very different from resolving the possible military dimensions.
We need to know forward-looking on this, on whether it is Parchin or other military facilities. Does the IAEA have access to go inside those
They
facilities?
certainly must have the access granted to, again, resolve the issues that they need to resolve. And they must have integrity in the process.
And if they do not, Senator, they would be in material breach of the agreement.
Okay, so this is different moving forward than what has gone in the past.
Absolutely. It's not only, yes, it is different, and there's a different mechanism to bring it to a close for the 15 years, but even under the additional protocol, speaking to Senator McCain's concern about North Korea, the lesson of North Korea produced the additional protocol, and now there's the additional protocol and the modified code, which have huge new requirements for access.
Secretary Lew and maybe Secretary Kerry on this, one of the proposals that has been put forward is to say no to this deal, and then to tell the other countries who are involved in regards to sanctions that a viable alternative is to simply say to France, Germany, Britain, and others, choose us or choose them as you move forward economically, that you know, if you're going to continue to do business with Iran, then you can't do business with us. Do you see that as viable moving forward?
Senator, we do have powerful tools that make it very dangerous for a foreign business to violate U.S. laws. And if they do business and violate our sanctions, we will enforce. Whether we can do that against the whole world effectively without doing damage to our own economy is something that we have to have serious considerations about. It's one thing when we're taking action in concert with the world. It's another thing if we're standing on our own. So the ability of a technical sanction to work is not the same as it being effective or necessarily adding up to what we would like to accomplish.
Okay, Secretary Carter, have you, I know you're talking to the GCC countries, you have been in the region there. It seems to me that one of the challenges here is confidence. Confidence that they'll be safe, that Israel will be safe. That's what this comes from, is making sure that your child can be safe and sleep safe that night. And that's what Mr. Netanyahu was trying to ensure, and that's what we're trying to ensure. So as you look at it, when you talk to our GCC friends and others, is there any putting together of a plan that says to Iran, not one more inch, that as we move forward, you'll see from year to year to year, that in Yemen, not one more inch, that against Hezbollah there will be massive retaliation if there's actions, that will stand with the Sunni tribal leaders in Anbar to make sure that they have success and will be viable and strong against whatever efforts Iran has in Iraq. To lay out the plan, let people know, let Iran know in advance would help create, I think, a better sense of confidence that there's a reason to stand with us.
I think that's extremely important, and that is what the GCC countries are looking for in my conversations with them, namely the continued commitment of the United States to help them protect themselves so they can sleep well at night, maintain our regional role, counter Iran's malign influence and activities. At the same time, they recognize perfectly well what has been set up here, which is an Iran with nuclear weapons would be an enormous problem, and are supportive of an agreement that heads that off. But at the same time, they want to make sure that we're there. That's what the GCC countries were told at Camp David by the president. My trip was in part to solidify all of the things we're doing.
I'm just about out of time, so I just want to finish by saying I think it's important to publicly state a not 1 inch more policy. And then additionally, I am not at all comfortable with our people who are still in Iran. They have to come home. I wish they had come home as part of this agreement. I know you do too. But this cannot rest because we don't leave anybody behind, and we don't intend to leave them behind either. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Moniz, I'd like to follow up a little bit on what Senator Blumenthal was asking you about with regards to the breakout time. What are some of the main factors that you consider when you calculate that breakout time?
Well, the key factors are the enrichment capacity and the stockpile of enriched uranium, but there are many other factors as well which come in, such as the rate at which additional capacity could be built in during a breakout time. So all of this comes in to our national laboratory evaluation.
That would include the number of centrifuges as well, is that correct?
Correct.
After 15 years of this agreement, what limits do you think will be in place on those things that you just mentioned?
Well, after 15 years, they will probably expand their capacity after those restraints, and that's why such a key element are the verification measures that we put in place for all time, basically.
So we're talking about tracking the nuclear material to make sure it's not diverted from a civilian program, correct?
And that's 25 years, right?
Correct. We are basically just checking Iran's math, correct?
Checking the math. Well, no, we're checking our math, if you like. So the idea is to follow.
We're checking our math.
Right, and for 20 years, we follow all the manufacturing, so it's the supply chain that we follow. And our intelligence people will tell you that to actually reproduce the entire supply chain covertly, probably in multiple places, would be very, very difficult to conceal.
And we're just looking at, of course, the declared facilities, is that correct?
No, we have, of course, strong measures in the declared facilities, but key is the undeclared facilities, which by definition ultimately rests on the actions of our and our allies and friends' intelligence capacity.
And do you believe, well, do you have confidence in that capacity that we will be able to locate any undeclared facilities and pressure Iran to allow us to make sure that we have verification in those as well?
Well, again, I would go back to the statements of General Clapper and Cardillo and Cohen. Again, Clapper said specifically that this will give us much greater insight into what they're doing. That then leads us and other intelligence agencies that we work with to point the IAEA in the right place. And now we have a unique new tool of a finite time to get access to that place, or they are in material breach.
Are you concerned at all on what I view as the discrepancies between statements made by our administration and compare those to what is statements being made by the advisor to the Supreme Leader when it comes to access to allowing the IAEA to look at the military centers in Iran, where I believe I've heard our administration say that We do have access to those. They are declared facilities, but yet the advisor to the Supreme Leader says the access of inspectors from the IAEA or from any other body to Iran's military centers is forbidden. Who's correct on that?
Well, I think we are correct. First of all, I just might point out that there were many statements made before Lausanne, before Vienna, that...
This one was made July 21st.
Yes, but I'm saying there were many statements made before then, and you can check those statements against the agreement. They don't square up all the time, shall we say.
How are you
Now, in terms
going
of,
to reconcile
in terms of the
that?
new, those statements were very clear. First of all, the aim is not to go to military sites. And by the way, it's not us, it's IAEA, of course. The aim is to go to where there is there suspicious or suspicion of nuclear relevant activities. If they are on a military site, doesn't matter. There is still the IAEA access to those sites.
I only have a few seconds left, but I would hope that you would reconcile those statements for the public.
We cannot control their statements.
You've stated that the 24-day waiting period for international inspectors won't allow the regime to conceal any illegal activity. But as I read the agreement, and many other people have pointed out, the inspectors' request to visit those sites could be delayed much longer than 24 days. I know that you're not concerned about the 24-day period. You believe that that we would, or the IAEA would be able to handle that. But if you look at different parts in Section Q of Annex 1 of the agreement, I think we have the potential that we're looking at an 89-day delay. Do you think that would be possible, and how confident are you about us being able to inspect
we certainly
them?
do. We certainly cannot allow for that. I might say, I did not say any illegal activity. I focused specifically or especially on activity with nuclear material as my real focus, number one. Number two is the IAEA has, at any sign of lack of cooperation, they have to launch the process with their request for access. Then comes the 24 days. As I've mentioned also, there is in the unclassified literature an example in Iran of a 6-month delay, an attempt to conceal, which did not work. They were caught red-handed.
You said you wouldn't allow the 89-day. You just couldn't allow that. Would you? How many days after 24 days would you allow?
No, it's not after 24 days. It's that the process to launch the formal request for access from IAEA has got to be prompt. That launches the 24-day clock, and that's the end.
You would not allow anything past that?
I would not.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for joining us. Thank you for your intense work on this. Obviously, we all care about the national security of the United States and our allies. Secretary Moniz, you and I had a very long conversation about nuclear details, and what I'd like you to discuss with the committee specifically is the nuclear capabilities that Iran has today are considerable, and most experts have given it a 2 to 3 month time frame to have enough enriched uranium for one bomb. I'd like you to talk a little bit about their nuclear expertise, and if left unchecked, how quickly can they ramp up to greater production, to more highly enriched uranium, if excluding this deal arrangement. And then after you've described that, I would like you to describe what the ramp-up time would look like post 8, 10, 15 years. Because what I understand from reading the agreement is that you've spent a lot of time identifying what can be changed and modified in the 3 existing facilities so that they don't run a military risk. And so I'd like that more fully described. And obviously, and the last point I want you to address is my constituents are very concerned about clandestine operations. To the extent you can talk about this in this setting, I would like you to address how you detect a clandestine enrichment facility during the agreement.
Quite a few questions, Senator. In terms of their current capacity, well, they have again demonstrated the capacity to enrich uranium. That's clear. But I do want to emphasize that they've also demonstrated they have enriched to 20% enrichment. 20% is the cutoff that the IAEA uses for low-enriched and high-enriched uranium. But the point here is that the amount of work needed to get to 20% is nearly all the work you need to get to 90%, which would be weapons grade. So they have the capability. As I've already mentioned, they are already have full cascades running of the next generation, 5 times more powerful. This agreement will have those dismantled at the time of implementation. So what's critical is we are rolling them back in every dimension of their program for at least a considerable period. Now, in terms of the breakout time, again, the President was very clear, and our P5+1 partners were very clear that a quantitative criterion for the negotiation was there had to be at least a 1-year breakout time in terms of fissile material for at least 10 years. We've accomplished that with this agreement. Our lab scientists are fully behind this, as are those of other countries. Then that will roll off, and after 15 years, at some point, depending upon what they do, then we can revert, we may revert to the current kinds of breakout times for fissionable material. We still need to keep the lid on weaponization activities and make sure those are not taken, and that was a notable improvement from Lausanne to Vienna.
Right. So the agreement says they can't ever make the steps towards weaponization.
And that's the point where we will be much better off at that time than today, because we will still have enhanced verification procedures that can point our and other intelligence agencies to any violations.
And after modifications at Iraq, is there any way that you can reverse those modifications and make it a heavy water plutonium facility again?
The Iraq reactor, in its redesign, would provide us, in this language, a breakout time of years.
Right. Because to unwind it would be significant.
Because once it's online, they would need years of operation to get enough plutonium to be relevant, and the IAEA would detect their change of the operation within 1 or 2 months.
And with regard to Fordo, what's the assessment there? After modifications, if they wanted to breach the agreement and try to get up and running again, does that take a significant amount of time?
Well, first of all, yes, because first of all, most of the centrifuges and infrastructure will not only be stripped out completely, but they will not even be stored at Fordo. They must be taken up to Natanz. Secondly, we will have a major international, not only IAE daily presence, but an international presence, the Russians working with them on stable isotopes, new science opportunities. If they kick everybody out, you know,
right away,
the alarm bells go off.
Secretary Carter, with my last few seconds, do our military options become marginally better or worse before or after the agreement?
If the agreement is implemented, they become marginally better for the reason that under the agreement, the facilities are, we learn more about them. Many of them are dismantled. So in that sense, that purely technical military sense becomes somewhat easier.
Senator Cotton.
Thank you. I want to discuss the 2 secret side deals between the IAEA and Iran. I had to travel to Vienna last weekend to discover the existence of these side deals. The administration has now confirmed their existence. There's still some lack of clarity about their content. Secretary Kerry, have you read either of these 2 side deals between the IAEA and Iran?
No, I haven't read it.
Have you read any previous drafts?
No, I haven't.
On any form, paper, tablet,
No,
computer?
I've been briefed through our team that met with the IAEA.
Did anyone on your team read the text of these agreements?
I believe one person may have read it at the facility, but doesn't have it. They don't possess it.
What is that person's name?
It's possible. I don't know for sure, but it's possible Wendy Sherman may have, but I don't know that for sure.
Secretary Moniz, have you read the text of these agreements?
No, sir. I've not seen them.
Have you read any prior version?
No, sir.
On any medium, computer,
Nope.
tablet, phone?
Nope.
Has anyone on your team at the Department of Energy?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I think not, but I'm not sure about that. I can ask. In terms of the technical team, maybe somebody saw something. But,
Please do and get back to us.
Okay.
Secretary Kerry, besides potentially Undersecretary Sherman, has, to your knowledge, anyone else in the United States government reviewed the text of these agreements?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know. I don't think so.
If Undersecretary Sherman has read the text of these agreements, even if they are not in her possession, does that not undercut the claims of confidentiality between the IAEA and Iran?
I don't know whether she read a summary or a draft, or I have no idea. I said I think, and I'm not sure, but I know she's briefing the Senate very shortly, Senator. So she'll be briefing in classified.
I have received several classified briefings about the deal, and I look forward to another one. But what Congress would like is the text of these agreements as required by U.S. law. Certain published reports, starting or most recently with the Associated Press yesterday, say that the content of the side deal that discusses Parchin, the military base where detonators for nuclear devices may have been tested, will allow Iran to collect their own samples and submit those samples to the IAEA, much like an NFL player taking his own urine sample and sending it to Roger Goodell for a drug test. Can you confirm or deny that that's the content of those side deals?
I can't here in this session, but what I can confirm is that Secretary Moniz, in his discussions both with the IAEA and with the team, made recommendations to them, and I believe is satisfied that this can, whatever the process is, that the process will be able to provide the answers we need. I don't know, Secretary Moniz, if you want to add anything to that.
Actually, no, I'd like to stick with you, Secretary Kerry. Why can't we confirm or deny the content of these agreements in public? Why is this classified?
Because
it's not a sensitive U.S. government document. The Ayatollahs know what they agreed to.
Because we respect the process of the IAEA, and we don't have their authorization to reveal what is a confidential agreement between them and another country.
So the Ayatollahs will know what they agreed to, but not the American people?
Well, no, not exactly, because we will share with you in the classified briefing what we understand the contents to be. But they negotiated the agreement with the IAEA. The IAEA is an independent entity under the United Nations, Senator, as I know you know, and I don't know even at this point what the law says about the United States requiring something which another entity's laws prohibit. So we have to see whether that's a conflict with law.
U.S. law requires any deal between any party, not just the United States, to be submitted to Congress before the 60-day clock begins to tick. To the extent the IAEA, which I respect for the very admirable work they do, which is often not supported by their member states, says it's unprecedented, I would say this deal is without precedent, and past precedents with cooperative countries like South Africa cannot be cited. I'd like to move on to a second topic, specifically Iran's support for terrorism. Could I have chart 1, please? General Dempsey, this chart describes a particularly powerful kind of roadside bomb known as an explosively formed penetrator. Are you familiar with what it shows?
I am, Senator.
Could you explain exactly what the bottom diagram shows of how an explosively formed penetrator works?
A copper cone is melted at super high temperatures and projected and essentially burns its way through armor plate.
The copper disk travels at about 6,000 feet per second. Could I have chart 2, please, so we can see what happens to a Humvee when a ball of fire travels at 6,000 feet per second? General Dempsey, is that familiar to you?
Yes, Senator, it is.
Do you know how many American troops were killed by such explosively formed penetrators?
That particular incident or
No,
in general?
in general.
Several hundred.
Was Iran a main supplier of these explosively formed penetrators?
Yes.
Was Qasem Soleimani and the Quds Force and the Revolutionary Guard Corps the main perpetrators in Iran?
Yes.
Secretary Kerry, those entities and Qasem Soleimani will ultimately receive sanctions relief from this deal, not necessarily from the United States government, but from the United Nations and the European Union. What should we say to the Gold Star moms and dads of the over 500 American troops who were killed by an Iranian ball of fire traveling 6,000 feet per second?
Well, we should tell them, obviously, first of all, how extraordinarily grateful we are for the service of their loved ones. We should also make it very, very clear that under the United States' initiative, Qasem Soleimani will never be relieved of any sanctions. It would also tell them and lay out to them what we intend to do, which has not been done yet sufficiently, to push back against Iran's behavior, that we have a number of laws in place, requirements by which we will be able to prevent Iran from transferring these weapons. And we have already engaged, Senator, in very forward-leaning initiatives to do that. We specifically turned around a convoy recently in the last months that was bringing weapons to Yemen, and we've been crystal clear, and I will be even more clear when I meet with the Gulf states about our united efforts to hold them accountable for these kinds of activities.
Thank you all. My time has expired.
Senator Rono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask this question of all of the witnesses, but I'd like to start with Secretary Carter and Chairman Dempsey. In your assessment, and without getting into specifics which cannot be discussed in this open setting, is there any military strategy or response that would achieve the same goals as the agreement before us without embroiling the United States and our allies in a potentially devastating long-term war in the region? And I would like a yes or no answer given the setting, starting with Secretary Carter.
Well, I'm sorry to be difficult on that, but I just need to understand the question a little bit more. You mean if there is no deal and Iran gets a nuclear weapon, and then we have a serious issue? We don't give up at that point, but we would have to defend ourselves, our friends, and our allies in the face of that reality. Is that responsive to your question?
Well, the reality is that if, without this agreement, Iran can produce a nuclear bomb in 2 to 3 months. So without this agreement, is there any military, I'll reiterate the question, is there any military strategy or response that would achieve the same goals as this agreement? More yes, more no?
I'm going to have to say that there is a military response. Maybe this is responsive to your question, Senator. There is a military option, which I know you've been briefed on, which has the effect, as I've said earlier, of setting back the Iranian nuclear program. It doesn't stop it forever, but it substantially sets it back. We've talked about that publicly for quite a while. We work on that, and so if that's responsive to your question, that exists.
The other part of my question is, yes, we can have a military response that would set them back, but would that military response involve us in a basically a long-term war in that region? Would that be a highly likely outcome of any military action?
Iran would surely respond to such an attack. So in the hypothetical situation in which that occurred, which this deal is intended to make unnecessary, Iran could respond for sure.
Chairman Dempsey?
One of my jobs, Senator, is never let the nation run out of options. So we would not run out of options, but they would become increasingly costly, to be sure.
And long-term?
And long-term.
Yes. Secretary Kerry, would you care to respond? And the
Well,
other
I think, Senator,
members of the panel?
I think General Dempsey answered the question earlier when he said that the deal is far more durable and provides a more durable option longer term, a period of time where it would be much more durable than the military option. I mean, look, I think it's pretty clear that if Iran were to start enriching or move back to its program, we have no inspectors, we have no sanctions that are universal. The United States can have them, but we've already seen sanctions don't get them to give up the program. So you're stuck with a situation of what will change the dynamic of their program. And the fact is, then you are in, as Secretary Carter has said, and as General Dempsey has just said, they will respond. And then we'll respond, and then it's back and forth. The question is, where does that end, and how does it end? And does it accomplish the goal of getting rid of their program? We don't believe so. We believe this agreement accomplishes the goal and provides us with the support on a continuing basis of the international community.
Thank you. Let me go on to another question because I am running out of time. This is for Secretary Carter and again, Chairman Dempsey. Are you contemplating any changes in our force posture, assuming this agreement goes into effect and stays in effect?
Yes. So it's a yes or no answer. Yes.
Well,
If I
this
could
is
say
not a
more,
yes or no answer.
if I could say more, Senator, in all
Briefly.
seriousness, yes, we are doing a great deal in the Gulf. That's what I was there talking to our Gulf partners about. That's what we talked about at the GCC summit a few months ago. We're doing a great deal with Israel. I mentioned missile defense, the F-35, qualitative military edge. So this is a dynamic region with or without a deal, and one that has Iran and other problems to boot. And so we have to and are doing a lot to strengthen our posture and our alliances and partnerships in the region, and we will continue to do so.
General Dempsey, would you like to weigh in?
With Israel, we're working on ballistic missile defense, maritime security, counterterrorism, and counter-tunneling, which is a new and emerging challenge for the State of Israel. And with the GCC, it's ballistic missile defense, special operating forces, maritime, counterterror, and cyber.
Thank you.
I'd like to tell the committee
Mr. Chairman.
that the witnesses have to leave at 12:45, so the order will be Senator Round, Senator King, Senator Tillis, Senator Sullivan, Lee, and Graham, and no one else, I'm sorry. So Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for your service. Today, you've gone through 15 different interrogators. I get to be number 16. One of the things that happens when you're number 16 is a lot of the questions that you've got have been asked. But it also gives you an opportunity to try to analyze and see just exactly what it's all about and what the real issues are. And I would like to just begin with this. It seems to me that one of the concerns that we have is if we assume that we have a rogue nation who is a threshold state today with regard to nuclear weapons, the goal of this was to eliminate them from having nuclear weapons, or in the second position, to delay the implementation or their capabilities with regard to nuclear weapons. I'd like to know from the panel, and it's very simple, are we stopping them from getting nuclear weapons, or are we delaying them for a period of 10 to 15 years from getting nuclear weapons, in your opinion? General?
Well, in my opinion, sir, our government's policy has been they will not get a nuclear weapon, and nothing we're talking about here today should change that policy.
Mr. Moniz?
I agree with General Dempsey, and in terms of our capabilities to make sure that they're not pursuing a nuclear weapon, this agreement will leave us better off with the agreement than without the agreement forever.
Mr. Carter,
I concur with those two.
Senator, I've worn many hats this administration, and each one I've said Iran will not be permitted to get a nuclear weapon. I believe that deeply.
Senator Kerry?
And I agree, President's policy is they won't get it. There's no, if they were to try to not implement this agreement, or the implementation is not full, the other options are still available to us. They will not get a weapon.
So, and if I may add just
Yes,
one note, just to say that in addition, I think it's significant that the agreement codifies with the P5+1 that Iran will never get a nuclear weapon.
And yet, here's my question then, gentlemen. It appears to me that in each time I've heard the discussion, it comes back down to, for a period of 10 years, we have something in terms of the agreement that restricts them. But somewhere between 10 and 15 years, we change. And that during that time period, they can begin, because there is nothing in the agreement which stops them from moving back into and adding to their nuclear capabilities. If they are a threshold state today, and if we have delayed them, that's one thing. But if at the end of this time period, they may freely pursue nuclear options, then I think that's really the gist that we're trying to decide. But along that line, and General Dempsey, I appreciated your thoughts here earlier when you said that you were pragmatic with regards to your comments. It seems to me that we had an embargo which was in place, which many of us were relying on when it came to both an arms embargo and also with regard to ICBMs. You indicated that as earlier, just in matter of fact, on July 7th of this year, you've heard it earlier, your quote was that under no circumstances should we relieve pressure on Iran relative to ballistic missile capabilities and arms trafficking. Secretary Carter said the reason that we want to stop Iran from having an ICBM program is that the I in ICBM stands for intercontinental, which means having the capability to fly from Iran to the United States, and we don't want that. Secretary Kerry indicated that there were other ways in which we could handle the situation. If we had an embargo in place and we had concerns about this, what's the purpose for the embargo if we had other means in the first place? General, clearly this seems to me that you were pretty clear that this was not exactly the kind of advice that you were suggesting that they allow this to come out.
Well, as I said, Senator, I would have been happy to see the embargoes maintained in perpetuity. I think the question would have to be asked, were they likely to be sustained in perpetuity, given that they were imposed to bring Iran to the table? Once Iran came to the table, it then became truly a negotiation. And sanctions are only one way to keep pressure on those other malign activities. We have other instruments and other military options to pursue.
Senator, if I could add to that, obviously, all of us would prefer have it there forever and ever. The problem is we're dealing with a UN resolution, the nuclear resolution 1929, which said to the Iranians, if they come to negotiate and suspend, then all the sanctions would be lifted. That was what was contemplated by the empowering resolution here. Now, the arms embargo was slid in at the very last minute by then UN Permanent Representative Susan Rice. She got it in, and it really sort of slid into the nuclear provision itself. But under the nuclear provision, at the end of a period of time, when the IAEA would draw its broad conclusion, this would have been lifted completely anyway, and we had no power to stop that. So in effect, our getting the 8 years was a victory, our getting the 5 years was a victory, but we have these other tools that completely strengthen our ability to do it in perpetuity.
Secretary Carter, would you say that that today Iran does not have the capability of getting an ICBM, and that 10 years from now, based upon the provisions in place, without the embargo, that they would still not be able to have an ICBM?
They don't have an ICBM today. I wouldn't rule out that in 10 years Iran could progress to an ICBM. We've seen in North Korea develop and test missiles of increasing range, and they can do that on their own, as the North Koreans have done, without a lot of external help. Now, that doesn't mean they would, and that's not a crystal ball of the future. But judging from principally the experience with North Korea, you can't rule that out, and that's why we need to protect ourselves. Whatever happens with the nuclear agreement, protect ourselves with missile defenses, with the other statutory and other international agreement protections that we have, deterrence and everything else.
Senator King,
Senator, my
Senator
time has
King,
expired.
Senator, your time has expired, Senator. Senator King, and I would ask the senators to respect the time limit.
You heard the chairman. We're going to try to go through some of these questions as quickly as possible. Secretary Lew, what would the Allies' reaction be in terms of the sanctions if the U.S. rejected this agreement?
Senator, I think that they have made clear that they think the agreement should be put into force. I don't want to speak for any of them, but they're already taking actions to show that they're beginning to deal with Iran in a different way. The Vice Chancellor of Germany was over there with a group of business people. There's a French delegation over there. I think that they're going to take a very dim view of our rejecting this agreement. On the other hand, I do believe they respect our unilateral sanctions. They fear them, and that will put them in a very difficult bind. But I don't think that we will have as much capacity to bring the world community together in that situation as we have had up until now.
And I suspect the reaction would be different among China and Russia may have a different reaction than Germany.
And I think if you look at at the developing countries like India, th're not in the P5+1. And I just pick them because they're a big economy that's dependent on oil imports. We have had a sustained diplomatic engagement with many countries to keep them in line with our oil sanctions. That will get harder and harder if they see the rest of the world going another way. They're going to look and ask, how much capacity do we have to take enforcement actions? Can they find ways around them? And ultimately, they'll start doing business more and more in other countries.
Would it be fair to say that the sanctions regime would fray, if not unravel?
I think that's fair. I've been trying to be measured.
Erode,
Yeah, I've been trying to be measured because I don't believe it's black and white. I think it would start to fray, yeah.
Appreciate that. Secretary Carter, you just visited the Middle East. Is the danger of proliferation greater or lesser as a result of this agreement? In other words, are some of our allies in that region who may think about their own weapon, are they less likely to acquire a weapon because of this agreement, or more likely?
Well, I think logic would suggest that if the agreement is implemented, meaning that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon, that it is less likely that other states in the region get a nuclear weapon.
Mr. Moniz, I know we're going to have a lot of time to talk about this, but there's been all this discussion about the secret agreement. It's true, is it not, that this agreement between the IAEA and Iran applies to the past past actions of Iran with regard to nuclear weapons at Parchin and other places, but does not apply to future inspections? We know what the future inspection regime is going to be in order to implement this agreement. Is that correct?
That's correct. Again, what the JCPOA accomplished is forcing Iran to cooperate with IAEA to finish the examination of past behavior.
So this so-called secret agreement is for a small part of this deal, but it's not the essence of it, which is the inspections and verification of Iran's compliance from today forward.
That is correct. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And finally, in 28 seconds, this famous 24 days, is there any way that they could clean up a facility where they had been processing fissile material sufficiently that it could not be discovered if the inspection took place after 24 days?
Well, I can never say 0.00%, but with very, very high confidence, I think we would find nuclear material utilization evidence. Certainly, the risk of getting caught would be extremely high.
Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope that I want to get back to, and Chairman Dempsey, I will start with you, but I want to go back to what you said, I think, in one of your responses to the malign activities that I believe that Secretary Carter, in response to a question, says he has no reason to believe that they will change. That's the Iran terror network. That's their increasing threat in terms of cyber terrorism. It is their ballistic missile program. It's their weapons trafficking. We could get into human rights violations, all the other things they're guilty of. We could get into an Ayatollah sending a tweet out that has the image of, some have said it's the president, some says it's an American, and someone wearing an American lapel pin. These people are evil people, and they're going to continue to expand in the areas where they think they can. They're people who have violated 27 international agreements or treaties. They have violated some of the terms of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Some of that language is similar, as I understand, in the agreement that we have here today. So they're dangerous. They're dangerous. I understand why you would be concerned with the nuclear threat, because it could limit other military options if it existed. So my question is, if this deal goes through, what does our posture look like in the Middle East and with our partners over the next 2 years? What looks measurably different to make us feel like we're in a position to make it untenable to the Iranian leadership to move forward with a nuclear weapon?
Senator, first, I do want to highlight the fact that when we talk about Iran, it's really the regime, and I know you know that.
There's no doubt about it.
Yeah,
it's not about the Iranian
It's not the Iranian people. It's Qasem Soleimani, the IRGC Quds Force, and their leadership. The Iranian people, there's some reason to hope that this would actually cause them to understand that there's a place for them in the international community. But how does our posture change? Our posture changes on the basis of these areas on which we've agreed to work with our partners, both Israel and the GCC nations. And we're very muscular. We have a muscular posture in the region right now. For the most part, it'll stay the same, but it may shift its activities a bit.
Secretary Carter or Chairman Dempsey, I'm trying to get my hands around the thought process that would make the Saudis less likely to try to acquire a nuclear weapon. Probably acquire a nuclear weapon, most likely from Pakistan, a warhead, and a ballistic missile from China that's capable of delivering a Pakistani warhead. Why would any of the leadership in Saudi Arabia, and then as a result of that, you only need one to spark other nuclear proliferation. Why on earth, if we're talking about a nation that has violated a number of treaties and agreements, the possibility that that could occur, and a nation having to be prepared to have their own deterrent, where's the logic in this agreement preventing them from going ahead and moving forward and having that capability themselves?
Well, the agreement doesn't limit what anybody else does. But,
No, I agree with that. I'm saying, why wouldn't they?
The logic, I can't speak for any of those countries, but the logic is that if Iran is effectively prevented from having a nuclear weapon, which is the purpose of this, then that cause, at least, for a Saudi Arabia or an Egypt or a Turkey to get their own nuclear weapon is removed, and logic would suggest that. I can't speak for the psychology, but that's what logic would suggest. With respect to Iranian behavior, I mean, this comes down to a question of managing that risk, because we see exactly what they say, what at least the leadership is thinking. And the point is that it's better if they don't have a nuclear weapon than if they do. This is an effective way of making sure that they don't have a nuclear weapon. It does not eliminate all risk associated with Iran. That's
Senator Heinrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary Carter, some have suggested that military strikes against Iran could be both quick and effective without acknowledging the costs and consequences and risks that might entail. Could you talk a little bit about what the primary risks, both to the U.S. and to our allies, would be if we had to take that course of action? And could you speak to what would set Iran's nuclear program back further, a military strike or this accord, in terms of timeline?
Well, speaking now just very generally and not specifically, the two things that make the successful implementation of the agreement preferable from that point of view to a strike is that the effects of a strike are temporary. And secondly, that Iran would, as I said earlier, respond to an American military strike upon Iran, and one needs to think through then what the subsequent steps are, including the possibility that Iran at that point would become irreconcilably committed to getting a nuclear weapon. Now, I say that's predicated on the effective implementation of this agreement, and effectively implemented, the agreement stops Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, not just for 10 years and not just for 15 years, but by dint of the provisions Secretary Moniz was talking about, way beyond that. So we're comparing that situation, which is effective implementation, complete implementation of this agreement, to the military option. Now, we also have to recognize that that there may not be effective implementation of this agreement. We have to recognize there may not be any agreement, and so forth, and that's why we're under instructions from the President to preserve, and indeed we are improving, and I can't go into that here, the military option, because temporary as it is and so forth, it needs to be there because that's our fallback if that's the only path left.
Since we're pursuing this accord, under this accord, do you think that that option gets more effective and stronger or less effective over the course of implementation of this deal?
As I indicated earlier, from a purely technical and military point of view, it gets marginally more effective, and the reason for that is that we have a more complete understanding of where everything is that could be associated with their nuclear program that we might strike, and have more detail about the nature of those things, and so it just follows that we can.
That makes perfect sense. Secretary Moniz, I want to get to you because I don't have a lot of time left. But can you talk a little bit from the point of view of a nuclear physicist about why it is so difficult to, if you have a covert facility where enrichment occurs, why it's so hard to sort of clean up the signs of having uranium or for that matter, plutonium at a facility like that? And would you answer the question, would an undeclared facility itself be a violation of the JCPOA?
Well, on the second part, absolutely, an undeclared facility would be a violation, and I think, frankly, a stern response would be in order. With regard to the cover-up, there's not too much we can say here in public, but just to say that the dealing with nuclear materials, whether it's enrichment or looking at the characteristics of uranium in an explosive situation, for example, would tend to leave lots of very, very small particles, difficult to clean up, but beyond that, we could talk in a classified environment.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen. You know, one of the frustrations that you're seeing here with the Congress is we are reading it, we're digging into it, and yet when we have questions, looking at the language, we seem to get these spin answers that don't seem to comport with the language. So, Secretary Lew, Secretary Kerry, I want to go back to the snapback provision. But is there a term called the snapback provision in the agreement?
I don't think it's specifically referred.
No, there isn't. The word snapback is not in the agreement.
No,
but let me make my point, Mr. Secretary. I got a lot of questions, and I don't have a lot of time. I think it would be helpful if you didn't use that term much. It's not in the agreement. I think in some ways it's deceitful because it's an illusion. And I think that in many ways the provision in the agreement, and I'll have my question, the snapback is actually more focused on the United States than it is Iran. And as you know, Mr. Secretary, those of us who were involved, I was in the Bush administration, of getting countries to actually economically isolate Iran, we used a lot of leverage. We did use leverage with countries saying, hey, you either are going to be in their market or ours. And that was effective. But it goes to this idea, if there is some kind of snapback, that was a slog. That wasn't a snap. That took years to get countries to divest out of the Iranian economy. It'll take years to do it again. But let me ask a hypothetical. It was actually a question I asked during the closed hearing. A number of senators, Republicans and Democrats, were not satisfied with the answer, and it focuses a little bit on what Senator Ayotte said. So let's assume sanctions are lifted. We get the whatever, 60 billion. The Iranians are looking for 120 billion of additional investment, so that's on top of what we would have in terms of whether it's 59 or 60. No violations of the agreement. The economy's humming along. There's an act of terrorism. By the way, the sanctions that are lifted are Annex 2, which is essentially all our bullets. This is a lot of American power, including the unilateral sanctions that you mentioned, Secretary Lew, on the financial system. An act of terrorism happens. It's big. They kill more American troops. They blow up a consulate. It's likely, I think it's likely, that they're going to do that in the next 10 years. The Congress is upset. The new president is upset. We impose sanctions. We reimpose Annex 2 sanctions. This is our power. And Mr. Secretary, Secretary Lew, I'm glad that you've talked about how this is power. We do have a lot of unilateral power with regard to sanctions. So then Iran cites paragraph 26 of the agreement, and I'm going to read it. It says Iran will treat such a reintroduction or reimposition of sanctions as grounds to cease performing its commitments. Deal's over. They're cranking, their economy's cranking. We just sanction them for terrorism with these sanctions, and they can walk. They can legally walk from this agreement. So let me ask you this. If we ever impose so-called snapback sanctions, isn't the deal over? Where am I wrong on that question?
Well, Senator, we would snap sanctions back once they violated the agreement.
No, I'm talking about, I'm not talking about a violation of the agreement.
Let's talk about two different worlds. One, they
answer the question. You didn't answer it in the closed setting. You're not answering it now.
You asked two questions. I was answering the first one. I was just taking them in order. The first set of questions you asked was about the snapback. Does it work? Yes, it works, because if they violate the agreement, our unilateral sanctions, we can do. As you know, I have the authority to put those back into place. The UN sanctions were structured so they will go back into place.
And they can walk.
No, that's if they violate the nuclear agreement. Scenario one is they violate the nuclear agreement. Scenario two, they blow up some facility, they take an act of terrorism, they do something non-nuclear, We have the right to put these kinds of measures in place. They are not nuclear sanctions at that point. They are terrorism sanctions at that point.
Iran has stated that it will treat such reintroduction, reimposition of the sanctions in Annex 2,
but Senator,
specified in Annex 2,
not reintroduction.
as grounds
Yeah.
to cease performing
So,
its commitments.
Annex
How am
2
I not reading that correctly?
Annex 2 lists the nuclear sanctions
I know
that are
it's in
being
Annex
removed.
2. It's huge.
Right.
The senator's time is expired.
And I'm happy to pursue this in greater detail. It's an important issue, but we have not given away our ability to put these kinds of measures in place for non-nuclear purposes, provided they comply with the nuclear agreement. If they don't live with the nuclear agreement, they go back in for violation of the nuclear agreement.
I think the Iranians have a different view.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a number of questions regarding the military implications of this deal. There's one other issue I want to follow up on, though. Secretary Kerry, why isn't this a treaty? And as a treaty, why isn't it subject to advice and consent with two-thirds of the Senate concurring?
Well, there are many reasons why, Senator, not the least of which is that we don't have diplomatic relations with Iran. This is a situation with a multilateral agreement with many countries, and you don't normally negotiate a treaty in that kind of context. So it's a political agreement, and we believe that the leverages that are in it through the snapback of sanctions, through the oversight and the inspections, are very powerful incentives for Iran's compliance.
Okay. I would note that there's nothing in Article 2, Section 2 that limits the definition of treaty along the lines of what you described. And in fact, nothing in your definition of the term treaty on the State Department's own website limits it that way. It defines treaty as a formal written agreement between sovereign states or between states and international organizations. It doesn't limit it to the fact that it has to be between two. I don't think that's an adequate answer, but we'll move on. General Dempsey, presumably one of the weapons systems that Iran is likely to acquire and that Russia has indicated a willingness to sell would be an advanced air defense system. Can you describe for us what kind of impact this might have on U.S. military operations? For example, hostage rescue operation, reconnaissance operations, and so forth?
Yeah, there's no question, Senator, it would make application of the military option to reduce their nuclear capability more difficult, but not impossible, but more difficult.
Thank you. Now, Wendy Sherman, the chief negotiator for the United States during these talks, stated in February of last year, of 2014, to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that Iranian ballistic missiles were, quote, indeed going to be part of something that would have to be addressed as part of a comprehensive agreement, close quote. Now, Secretary Kerry, at the time, was Secretary Sherman referring to lifting the UN embargo on ballistic technology when she made this statement to the Foreign Relations Committee, or did the United States intend to include restrictions on ballistic missiles in this agreement?
Well, it does include. In fact, it's under Chapter 7 and enforceable, therefore, under the United Nations, Chapter 40, Article 41. And there are restrictions within this agreement. And I would also comment on the earlier question that the defensive weapons are not covered by the embargo. So the S-300, for instance, from Russia is not covered anyway.
I do have to ask another question, Secretary Kerry. Given the fact that one of the problems that we've got with Iran, one of the reasons why we're so concerned about Iran getting nuclear weapons, has to do with the fact that this is a roguish state, a state that has made not only threats, but taken aggressive actions toward the United States and her allies, has made threats to wipe Israel off the map, for example. There are real reasons why we don't want them getting nuclear arms. In light of the fact that that's the biggest reason why we're so concerned, why we're willing to enter into negotiations to possibly lift sanctions against Iran, giving Iran a big economic benefit. Why on earth didn't we insist as a condition precedent to getting any deal at all that Iran, for the love of God, cease and desist from its terrorist ambitions, cease and desist from making comments like that it wants to wipe Israel off the map, cease and desist from undertaking and funding acts of terrorism against the United States and her allies?
Well, as was mentioned earlier, I said, look, it would be great and ideal if one could negotiate that. I'm not sure how long it would take. And given the imperatives that we had with respect to Iran's 19,000 centrifuges, 12,000 kilograms of weapons fissile material equal to 10 to 12 bombs already, their mastering of the fuel cycle, and their near imminent finishing of the Iraq reactor, which would have produced weapons-grade plutonium at the rate of 2 weapons a year, we felt that we had to keep this targeted on the greatest threat of all that you've just defined, which is the potential of their having a nuclear weapon. And if indeed they're meaning to translate their slogans of death to America, death to Israel into policy, then getting rid of the nuclear weapon is everybody's first imperative here. So that's what we focused on, because we knew that you could get tangled up. Our definition, one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. You can be fighting forever on the issue of Sunni, Shia, definitions of who's protecting whom, and you won't get anywhere. You literally will not get there. That's why we separated those activities. Now, that does not reduce our commitment, as we've defined here again and again, to push back on every one of those activities. But it's easier to push back against an Iran that doesn't have a nuclear weapon than one that does.
Senator Manchin has one question, I believe.
I just have one question, one second, very quick. I read, and I just want to go over this and just any reaction you may have. Fareed Zakari wrote, and I read this in my local paper back home, let's imagine the opponents of the nuclear agreement with Iran get their way. The United States Congress kills it. What is the most likely consequence? Within 1 year, Iran would have more than 25,000 centrifuges. Its breakout time would shrink to mere weeks, and the sanction against it would crumble. How is this in America's national interest, Israel's or Saudi Arabia's or any of the people in that area? And they say it's not a plausible scenario. In 2005, 3 European powers rejected the nuclear deal with Iran with 2 years of negotiation. So all I would ask is, if this does collapse, does that put them on an accelerated, with their intentions being shown already, does it put them on an accelerated path? And I think maybe it might be.
Well, we believe so. The President believes it. Our intel community believes it. Our intel community has made it very clear to us that there's no return to negotiations with this Ayatollah, and that they will then believe we've given them the reason that they have to develop a nuclear weapon.
Well,
because we won't deal in good faith.
John, I'm sorry, Secretary. Between November 2012 and 2013, even when we had the noose around their neck, they still produced 6,000 more centrifuges. So their determination is to do it no matter how much we have them strangled, correct? And Secretary Moniz, have you all followed that as far as?
That is quite correct, yes.
So they're determined. They're going to move forward.
Absolutely. They've declared they would go to hundreds of thousands of SWU versus the current 20,000.
And you believe in the heart of hearts and deep in your
So
soul.
the one question is now expired. Senator Graham.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. General Dempsey, do you believe the Iranians have been trying to build a bomb or a nuclear power program for peaceful purposes all these years?
I believe they have a militarization aspiration.
Who's the commander-in-chief of the Iranian Armed Forces, Secretary Carter? Who calls the shots?
The Supreme Leader.
Who decides if Iran goes to war? Supreme Leader, right?
I believe so, yes.
Who decides if they try to break out? The Supreme Leader?
Yes.
Does the Supreme Leader's religious views compel him over time to destroy Israel and attack America?
I don't know. I don't know the man.
Well, let me tell you, I do.
I read what he says.
I know the man. I know what he wants. And if you don't know that, this is not a good deal. Could we win a war with Iran? Who wins the war between us and Iran? Who wins? Do you have any doubt who wins?
No, the United States.
We win. Is it your testimony here that Saudi Arabia is okay with this deal and they've committed to you they're not going to feel compelled to get a bomb because of this deal?
No, my testimony is that I can't speak for Saudi Arabia.
Well, you have spoken for Saudi
I've
Arabia
spoken
all over the
to
American
Saudi
media,
Arabia.
reassuring everybody in this committee they're okay.
I reported what they said. So.
Do you think they were lying to you? Or do you think they
Of
were
course
wanting
not.
weapons?
Of course
do you
not.
think
I
they were
can only
telling
say
you what you
they
wanted
said.
to hear to
This
get
is a
more
little bit
weapons?
like, what does the Ayatollah think? You know, read what he
yeah,
says.
okay,
And I
fine.
take it at face
Who's
value.
your counterpart, Mr. Moniz? What's his name?
Mr. Salahi.
Have you read what he said on July 22nd, according to the Middle East Media Research Institute, about the side deal? He said, let's see, we have reached an understanding with the IAEA, God willing. There will be very positive results. We do not accept the PMD arrangement. We don't agree with that, and we reject the concept. What kind of arrangement has he made to make him feel so positive?
First of all, I had not read it. That's the first
I'm
question.
going to give it to you.
Secondly,
You don't have to answer. Would it be surprising to you that he's telling the Iranian people, don't worry about this side deal, we're going to get a good outcome?
I assume what he is suggesting is
Well, if you didn't know about it-
is that there were no nuclear materials in Parchin, and that remains to be seen.
I assume
That's my
that he's
assumption, but I
saying
don't
that
know.
we've reached an arrangement that we're okay with. That's what I assume, but the difference does matter.
I would read it differently from hearing it.
Okay, well, we don't know what he means,
Mhm.
and apparently we don't know what the Ayatollah wants. I know what he means. He means he's reached an agreement where they don't have to worry about an inspection. And I think the Ayatollah will eventually acquire a nuclear weapon unless somebody stops him. Do our allies in Israel across all party lines believe this is a bad deal, Secretary Kerry?
No, not everybody believes a bad deal.
Name one political party in Israel.
A political party. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
people who are actually governing the country. Name one political party in Israel that is
No,
for this deal.
I didn't hear you say political party.
I'm sorry.
No, political parties are opposed.
Every political party in Israel is opposed to this deal. So when you speak about Israel in this deal, it's not Bibi, it's everybody. Thank you.
No, Senator, it's actually not everybody. Ami Ayalan, the former head of Shin Bet, believes.
Not a political party.
No, but you said everybody in Israel.
The time has expired. I don't think we, Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. I ask that your answers be brief because my time is limited. General Soleimani, the head of the Al-Quds forces, has more blood of American service members on his hands than any living terrorist. Under this agreement, the sanctions on General Soleimani are lifted. Now, Secretary Kerry said to the families of those men and women who gave their lives, who were killed by General Soleimani, we should apologize. Secretary Carter, I understand that the Joint Personnel Recovery Agency has a classified list of roughly 500 American soldiers who were murdered by Iranian IEDs. I would ask Secretary Carter, so that we can do what Secretary Kerry suggested, that the Defense Department release that list to every member of this committee, declassify that list, and release it directly to the service members' families who were murdered by General Soleimani.
Well, let me look into that, and I'll get back to you, Senator.
Senator, I never said the word apology. I never mentioned apologize. I said we should thank them for their extraordinary service. I never said a word apologize. Please, don't distort my words.
Secretary Kerry, it is duly noted that you do not apologize to the families of the service members who were murdered by the
Not
Iranian
what I
military.
said, Senator.
Do you apologize or not? I don't want to put words in your mouth, so which one is it?
I thank them for their extraordinary service, and I would remind them that the United States of America will never take the sanctions off Qasem and Soleimani.
So, sir, I just want clarity. Do you apologize or not? Because you wanted to clarify that point.
I said we thank them for their service, but we will not take the sanctions off Qasem and Soleimani.
All right, Secretary Moniz, I want to turn to a different question. The single greatest threat to the United States if Iran acquires a nuclear weapon is that of an electromagnetic pulse. A nuclear weapon detonated in the atmosphere over the eastern seaboard that could kill tens of millions of Americans. On July 23rd, in testimony before Congress, you told the United States Senate you hadn't read the congressionally mandated commission on EMPs and that you didn't know what an EMP was.
That is incorrect. I said I did not know this 2008 report recommendations. I said I was quite familiar with the issue, and we all know about EMPs from airburst nuclear weapons.
Secretary Moniz,
So
let me
please
read the testimony verbatim so that I don't mischaracterize you. Senator Johnson, sir, let me read what you said.
Please.
Senator Johnson, are you familiar with the EMPs Commission's 2008 report? No, I am not, sir. You're not? Do you know? Do you know what an EMP is? You'll have to explain it to me, please. I find that stunning. This is testimony.
That was about the report. If you read further in the testimony, you will see my explicit statement. Of course I know about the issue. I happen to know something about nuclear weapons. I know about EMPs. I know about various actions.
Do you agree that an EMP detonated by Iran in the atmosphere
an
could kill
EMP
tens of millions of
detonated
Americans?
by anyone, obviously, is a very potent weapon.
It could kill tens of millions of Americans? Do you agree with that?
That would depend, obviously, on the specifics of
But do you agree that it could?
It depends upon the specifics. These are highly
Does that mean
variable.
yes, it could?
I said it is highly variable in its
Okay, you're
impact.
refusing to answer the question. Secretary Carter, is it correct that Iran is the leading state sponsor of terrorism in the world?
I was asked before, and I believe that's true, yes.
Do you have any doubt whatsoever if in excess of $100 billion goes to Iran, that some of that money will go to jihadists who will use it to murder Americans?
I can't say that. I can say that their malign activities about which we're extremely concerned are quite well funded today.
Okay.
And it's
But
those
finally,
malign
because I just have a
activities
second
and
left.
the rest of their conduct that makes it so important that they not also have a nuclear weapon.
Finally, because I just have a second left, Secretary Kerry, you told Senator Lee that this was not a treaty because we don't have diplomatic relations with Iran. I would note that is directly contrary to the testimony you gave yesterday to the House.
No,
when you were asked, why is this not considered a treaty? And I will read your answer verbatim. Well,
Senator,
Congressman, I spent quite a few years. Sir, let me ask the question.
You're not reading my whole answer, because
Well,
I also
Congressman,
said what I just said.
The
Secretary
senator's
Kerry.
time, I apologize, the senator's time has expired, and I promised the witnesses that I would get them out as every member that wanted to was able to ask question. I want to tell the witnesses I appreciate their patience. I know it's been a very long morning for them. I also know that they appreciate the gravity of this issue and the importance of allowing every member of the committee to at least ask questions and be informed by your testimony. So, Senator Reid?
Mr. Chairman, could we keep the record open in case there are senators that have written questions?
I'm sure that Senator Manchin will have a written question for you, so as will Senator Nelson. So I want to thank the witnesses, and this is a very important issue, and the testimony has been very important, I think, not only to members of the committee, but the entire Senate. I thank the witnesses. We're adjourned.